Hello, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. If you hit the notification bell, then you'll get content as it's released. So I want to cover something a little different today. It's something I've never done, and I haven't seen anybody else comment on this. So I figured, if you want to hear something about it, that you just hear my opinion on it. That's all it is. So a few months ago, John Danaher released his newest noGi instructional, Standing to Ground. And so John's really motivated to fix a few things in Jiu Jitsu. One of those being the takedown game. So he's a really good coach, and he has taken a lot of material over the years from wrestling, judo, and Jiu Jitsu, and to provide good systems for his students to improve their competition. So he's most well known for his leg locking sequences that he's developed from studying other people's games like Dean Lister and Eddie Cummings. And that's only from what I've read. If you know more about the history of that, feel free to elaborate in the comments section. That's just pretty much what I know about it. His main motivation for wanting to improve the takedown game is from the perspective of taking an opponent to the ground against their will, controlling them on the ground against their will, and then submitting them. So this is in contrast to what most of his students have done over the years, which is to pull guard and attack and submit from the bottom position, or sweep and submit from the top position, which is something that we've been seeing Gordon Ryan do more recently. And his top game has really improved tremendously. So that's something that John has already improved upon in his new sort of evolution of the sport. So John stated more than once that you can't just bolt on judo or wrestling to jiu-jitsu. This is primarily for noGi ADCC rules. And this is because from his perspective, that the high amplitude throws that you use in judo or wrestling, they don't have any control, and they don't award the points like they do in judo and in freestyle, right? So for example, like if you throw somebody with a high amplitude throw in jiu-jitsu, it doesn't give you anything, right? Like any more points like it does in wrestling or judo. And then so he says, and this is like his major selling point is that you need an entirely new system. And so in judo, it used to be like the rules in freestyle, wrestling, and Greco were very similar. If you took somebody from their feet to their back, it was over. So in judo, that's the ippon, right? And in wrestling or freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling, if your legs go over like that and you landed on your back, it was over. Nowadays, that's not the case. You still get awarded points, but more points, right, for a high amplitude throw, but it's not over. It's not like they call it a touch fall in wrestling. But, he sort of conveniently leaves out the scholastic wrestling approach, which is all about control, right? So it completely negates that concept, because in scholastic wrestling, which is high school and collegiate wrestling, or middle school, but it's the predominant wrestling in the United States. Olympic wrestling, like freestyle and Greco, is the predominant wrestling in the rest of the world. They don't do scholastic wrestling. But in scholastic wrestling, you don't get awarded any more points for throwing somebody with a high amplitude throw. So like lat dropping them, you don't get anything. You're not allowed to belly to back, like throw people. You're not side saltoing people, none of that stuff. You don't get any points for it. And then there's rules like for not hurting people, right? So because it's for high school and stuff, so they don't want people getting slammed. But you have to take somebody down and you get control. So like in a scrambling situation, whereas in freestyle, you might be exposing your back and losing points. You lose no points in scholastic wrestling for doing that until the person has control over you. It's literally very similar to jiu-jitsu in that regard. The only difference is being that once your back gets threatened in wrestling, you're going to bail to your stomach. And I'll get to that in a second. But in ADCC, it kind of isn't all that different, because you can go to turtle and not get takedown points awarded. It's really strange. Okay. But I'll get into that in a second. But scholastic wrestling is all about control. Even so much that in collegiate wrestling, you actually get awarded a point at the end of the match if you had more control from the top position on the person than he had, right? So, and they define that by a time clock, right? So like if I take somebody down, that clock starts right away after the takedown's been awarded, because I'm in control in a top position. That person has to get out and get away or reverse the position, at which then the clock would start reversing. And if you have more than a minute at the end of the match, you're actually awarded a point. And only 1 point, but you still get awarded a point. So you can win by riding time. And I actually have won matches in college by riding time. So anyway, it is all about control, Scholastic Wrestling. Okay. That is a convenient thing that he left out. So in a recent promotional video that John had with Bernardo Faria, or Farhia, I think it's pronounced, he talks about the differences in the rules from ADCC with those of wrestling, right? So you need to take an opponent down to his back in ADCC, and then you'll get the points, right? So wrestlers aren't going to be dumbfounded by this, like he kind of makes it sound like, because I've heard him say in other videos, it's like, wait a minute, I got a takedown. I took the guy down to his butt. It's like, no, you didn't get the takedown. You have to take him down to his back. I can't remember who he was talking to about this. I think it was either Lex Freeman or Joe Rogan, but it was like, okay, like, that's literally what you're taught to do in wrestling. Like he even uses the terms like in ADCC, you have to pin the guy back to the mat. You have to pin him to the mat in order to get the points. And so it's not like, a wrestler like is just going to be like, oh man, I have no idea what to do from here. This is completely different. Like you're taught to take people down to their back. Obviously, I'm not making the case that this is a wrestling versus jiu-jitsu thing. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for years and I love it. It's predominantly what I do now. But just making a point here, okay? These things aren't as different as they're making it sound. So if the guy goes to turtle in ADCC, you don't get the takedown, which is a dumb rule, by the way, I think, because the guy's just conceded a dominant position, right? So like, let's say you double leg him and then he turns to turtle, which is exactly what you would do in wrestling, by the way. Scholastic Wrestling, not Freestyle or Greco. Freestyle or Greco, you just have to not get turned for 20 seconds. But in Scholastic Wrestling, it's like ADCC in terms of like, you can go to, belly, go to your knees and your elbows, and then try to stand up and get out, right? So, but in ADCC, they don't even award you the takedown. It's really dumb because you just conceded a dominant position with the guy on your back. You actually have to get in both legs in ADCC, right? So this is a point that John was making. In collegiate wrestling, although you don't get points for getting legs in, this was literally the system that we were taught. It's to get on top, get legs in because it prevents the person from getting out. And so while the goals are different, right? You in college wrestling or high school wrestling, you try to turn people to their back and pin them instead of submitting them. The concept about control is identical. If you can't hold them down, then you can't control them, right? They'll stand up and get out. So you can't submit somebody if you can't control them from standing up and getting away from you. Just like in Scholastic Wrestling, he's going to get a point from showing the ref, right, that he can stand up and get away. Like, you can't control me, right? So the whole game is about control. Those concepts are the same. You can't pin somebody if you can't control them in wrestling. You can't submit them if you can't control them in jiu-jitsu, right? So in the same video, right, with Bernardo, this is to promote his instructional Standing to Ground, the second one. He says why he wanted to focus on upper body attacks as opposed to shots, right, like shooting on the legs. And he claims that many people say that upper bodies attacks are harder to learn than lower body attacks. He actually says it's easier to teach somebody a single or a double than it is to teach and then throw. And 32 years, nearly 32 years now of wrestling, I've never heard anybody say that ever. It is not easy to teach somebody how to take somebody down with leg attacks. You have to teach them the proper position. You have to teach them to level change. You have to teach them to shoot. You have to teach them all kinds of things. The issue is that and I understand his rationale for wanting to go to upper body attacks, by the way, just so you know. The issue that I have with learning those things, both upper and lower body attacks, is that it requires proper positioning, okay, proper hand fighting skills and deception, right, setting people up. And those things right there, these are the biggest problems that jiu-jitsu is facing with regards to the takedown game. It is that they don't have great position from a standing position. There's hand fighting skills, their mat return skills, their ability to stand up, so getting away from somebody, their ability to hold people down, right? All of these things are Scholastic Wrestling, by the way. They're terrible, okay? The mat returns are terrible. And I'm not laughing because like, oh, ha, 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 right? Because like a lot of people can submit me like when I'm on the ground with them, right? It's not that. It's that their ability, when you watch the technique is bad. These are amazing athletes, and they need, once they learn the proper technique, they're going to be so deadly. The skills that they have right now are nowhere near even being able to, you can't even really teach them the proper setups using deception because the basic stance and positioning is off. We're a long way from that. Okay. Now, I think that this is why John is wanting to remedy these things, right? Like he did with the leg locking system stuff, right? So he's trying to improve upon this, and somebody should, and he's got a wide open platform to do it. I definitely disagree with John's ideas that throws are easy to learn. I understand why he wants to do it because, you know, he says, well, judo requires more skill because of the distance and stuff. I disagree with that. Okay. Like the stance in wrestling, like, or jujitsu is terrible because guys are doing T-Rex arms and your hands should be out first. So he says it's your head defense, then your hands, then your hips. He's wrong. It's not that. It's your hands are first because they can go out further than your head. Your neck can't, you know, extend way out from your body. Your hands are out first. Then your head is the second line of defense, then the hips. So the guy has to get past my hands. And if he gets past my hands with control, right, elbow control, things I've shown on my channel, hit wrist control, then I have to defend him with my head. I got to drop my head to it if he's taking a shot on me, for example. But even if he's trying to do an upper body attack, it's my head position relative to his head that's going to prevent those things. And then if he gets past all those things, the last line of defense is my hips. Okay, so I think it just speaks to when him saying that judo is more like technical. Yeah, I think it just speaks to his lack of wrestling experience. Okay, this isn't an insult. It's just that he doesn't have any. Okay, he never wrestled. He never claimed to wrestled. He has more judo experience than he has wrestling experience. And I've seen some of what his judo does, and it's better than his wrestling. Okay, so one of my I've mentioned this before, but one of my collegiate wrestling coaches, Andy Saris, was a Greco Olympian. Okay, he was a Greco world champion, Pan Am Games champion, and he was head coach of the Greco world team while I was in college. And then he became head coach of the Greco Olympic team a few years after my college with him. And believe me when I tell you that there's a lot of skill that's required for upper body attacks. Okay, a lot. I think John is very much underselling or overselling that upper body attacks is like the way to go because it's easier. It absolutely is not. Okay. I know why he wants to do it because he wants his students to be able to take somebody down to the ground and have chest control right after the takedown. And that's literally the point of wrestling. Like we want that too. Okay. We want to be able to take somebody down to their back. And as soon as we get them to hold them there, because that's where you would get your points in ADCC, but you'd also get your points with that in wrestling too. So you have to understand that those two things are identical. It's not an entirely new system. Okay. Taking a person to the ground and ending up in that position is preferred, but good freaking luck getting there. Okay. I have a number of videos where I talk about this and the statistics on track wrestling, like they speak to themselves. These are people who are experts in takedowns, right? There's a reason why they're not all trying to go to upper body takedowns. And it's because they're inherently risky. The strongest part of the person, right? I've said this multiple times on my channel is from your hips to your knees, right? So your hips and your legs. And when you are going for upper body attacks, their hips and legs are free to move. And unlike so they can then, do damage to you, right? They can counter your attacks. And that's why they're inherently risky. And the stats speak for themselves on that, right? Unlike the lower body attacks where they're taken away. Now it's true that in jiu-jitsu, you have to worry about the chokes. I'm aware of that. And in terms, I do jiu-jitsu. Okay. I've been doing it for years. And then also, the Kimura, but when I started wrestling, like freestyle, Kimuras were actually like still around. You were allowed to use them. They ended up getting like outlawed, like right when I started wrestling, but you could still use them for positional control. So I'm aware of those things. Okay. And that would come from a lower body attack. It's kind of what makes jiu-jitsu amazing is that there's no one position that's amazing, like completely dominant. There's ways out of everything. Right. So, okay. So does John provide an entirely new system? No, he does not. Okay, I've watched the entire thing, and this is a wrestling system. Okay, it is primarily a scholastic wrestling system. He shows some stuff from like freestyle, like a gut wrench and stuff that he does or whatever to get legs in. But the most important part of the game, right, is about control, right, which is primarily scholastic wrestling, right, like the style where you want a lot of control. And there's literally not a thing that I saw him do in this video that I haven't seen before in the years that I've wrestled. Okay. Now it's primarily a high school level wrestling instructional that's geared towards noGi, Jiu Jitsu, and the ADCC rule set. So now, is that going to benefit you? Overall, I would say, like, yeah, like if you have no wrestling experience whatsoever, then you're certainly going to benefit from this, like 100%, right? I mean, after all, it is an existing wrestling system. And obviously I believe in those systems, or else I wouldn't have spent my entire like 3/4 of my life now, right? I've spent wrestling, like teaching the system, right? Trying to get high school kids into to get collegiate wrestling scholarships, right? So that's like what I've spent my like life on. And you have a short amount of time to do it. If they haven't no wrestling experience, they come in high school, freshmen, you have only a few years to really work with them to try to get them good enough to get into college, right? So they can go to college like on a scholarship, right? So I believe that Scholastic Wrestling translates beautifully to jiu-jitsu. It's literally the basis of my channel, right? A ton of what he shows was already published on my channel long before he came out with the instructional. And it's because it's Scholastic Wrestling, it's classic wrestling that you can use. I use a blend of things just like he does, right? And so I mean, good position is good position, right? So one can't argue that wrestling doesn't work in jiu-jitsu anymore because when one uses an entirely known system of wrestling for jiu-jitsu, then, you know, that argument should be gone. Okay. Because John just literally put out a high school wrestling instructional, except for like stand-up. He does show a little bit of stand-up and stuff, but by and large, right, the takedowns, the ability to shut down takedowns, the arm drags from after you have somebody, you know, after you've pushed somebody back from your legs, all that stuff, that's all wrestling. Okay. You can't use the argument that wrestling doesn't work anymore in jiu-jitsu when you're literally using a current wrestling system to do it. Okay. So absolutely what he's showing you is wrestling. And I definitely think it's going to benefit your jiu-jitsu, right? John's a great teacher. So, and I like the way he teaches. And if you like his coaching, if you've never wrestled before in your life, then you're certainly going to benefit from it. If you do jiu-jitsu and it's been a long time since you've wrestled, then you probably also will benefit from it as a refresher and stuff. But don't expect to really learn anything new or on any more detail than what you already know. So John was really far ahead with the leg locking system. And I think as a result, if his students learn the system in the Standing to Ground instructional that he just put out, then they're going to be way ahead with their takedown and positional control on the ground and stuff in their jiu-jitsu game, right? So this is what I think he's doing. He's trying to move forward jiu-jitsu and be way ahead of everybody else. If you're looking for the same incredible detail with this instructional that he has with his other instructionals, I don't think you're going to get that. Actually, I know you're not going to get that at all. Okay. So the details that make these moves that he's showing in this instructional work against highly skilled opponents and the depth of the understanding that he has, it's definitely nowhere near the same level of understanding that he has in jiu-jitsu. So please understand that I'm not trying to insult him here. Okay. Like that's not what I'm doing. It's actually amazing that somebody can learn wrestling using a cerebral approach alone, because it's not a secret that he's never wrestled. He's said that, right? Everything he's learned from wrestling, it's from watching other people do it. It's not going to give you the details that you need in order to make them systems work on a highly skilled opponent, but with no wrestling experience, like that's to be expected. And I don't think you really need super, super high level wrestling to improve your jiu-jitsu. I think if you understand his system, you're going to do quite well. He's going out, I think, beyond his area of expertise to do this, but I think it's because he sees the importance of people knowing how to do takedowns and stuff and control on the ground, right? Because otherwise people could stand up and get away. And it's not that his mechanics are bad, because his mechanics and position aren't bad. I just want to make that clear. It's just that they're not really good. They're not like super high level, or at least they're nowhere near the detail that he has with jiu-jitsu. So for example, the amount of detail that he can give you on his mount escapes, which really helped my game, like his understanding of mount escapes, his closed guard game, right? Leg locks, etc. It's like far greater than what he's showing like here in this system, right? And I think he would agree that, you know, he's not going to be like a collegiate wrestling coach. Like, you know, I think he could be a high school wrestling coach, to be honest, with what he knows. but it's not like it's super high level. Okay. I mean, he is in fact a 6th degree black belt. So of course he knows more about jujitsu and the details that make things work than he does for wrestling. He's been doing it a long time. And perhaps it's because I've been wrestling at a high level and for 3 decades, right? That I can see that the details that are lacking in his wrestling experience for like the takedowns and then like the takedown defense and how to hold people down and how to, get out and all those things, et cetera. But a high school wrestler who was really good would be able to, I think, see those things too. Okay. Like I said, it will certainly benefit you if you haven't ever wrestled before, but don't really expect to like get this system and then like be able to go and just like take down like high level high school wrestlers or anything like that. Like you're not going to be stuffing their shots. There's too many other things that they're going to chain together in their existing systems, which he's, by the way, showing, just not any kind of detail, but they're going to chain together systems that are going to, they're going to end up getting the takedown more than likely because there's so many holes in the offense and defense, right? But again, it's not an insult. Okay. Please understand that. It's just the facts. Okay. So I don't think you need to be a high level wrestler in order to take people down in jiu-jitsu. I gather that we're going to see this sport evolve to a more rounded system because of his influence. He clearly has a massive influence on jiu-jitsu, and it's a good thing seeing him push this stuff in that direction. And so again, to recap, I do believe that you will benefit from his instructional. Okay. Frankly, for like 10 hours and $200, it's definitely worth it. But I don't think you're going to outsmart wrestlers on the mat with takedowns and stuffing their takedowns and all that kind of stuff, but you'll be able to hang with them. And then maybe you'll be able to hang with them long enough to be able to trick them into choking them and stuff like that. Cause that's actually all you need. I mean, the older I get, I'm not ahead of the 20-year-olds on the mat now. I have to be smarter than them. And I have to know something that they don't know. And that comes from in jiu-jitsu, for example. Like, I'm not going to try to match their intensity. I can shut them down long enough, let's say with my wrestling, and then end up in a position where maybe the choke was easier to get, right? And then against a higher level person, I don't get the choke, but I slowed it down. And then that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu, is it flows and flows and flows, and it's awesome. And so, so I'd say overall, it's a good composition. It's a good compilation of work, so let me know what you think. I recommend it. And I think, he's going to make a massive impact in jiu-jitsu, and I can't wait to see it. But again, like, if you're expecting it to be like the same level of detail as like his leg locking stuff and mount escapes, then you might see it that way if you don't know anything about wrestling, but it's still going to benefit you quite a bit. It's just not the same like upper level. But anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. If you are new to the channel and you like the content, like and subscribe. Please follow, leave comments, share the material if you like it. And until then, thanks again.